please. I've spent the largest part of my working, this is far too loud, can you show me that? It's unpleasant for me, never mind you. In a family construction company, which I couldn't join until my father had retired and didn't want to anyway, but did. And I remember going on a site visit one day to a project that was about 98% finished, and the guys were working their socks off doing the final 2%. And I got shown round and I met everyone, and I didn't go in the cabin afterwards to meet everyone of our team there because they were just too busy for it, or it was extremely brief. So we went and had a cup of tea afterwards in the stock cabin. And the stock cabin was phenomenally full. And I said, wait a minute, we're 98% finished. How come there's so much stuff in? Oh, they said. And it was absolutely obvious that their focus had been on completing the job, on doing it right, on partnering with all the other trades that you have to do in construction, on looking after the client and their client and so on, and they just hadn't managed at all the amount of stock. So I said, well, what's going to happen to this stock? Oh, it'll go back to the suppliers. I said, don't give me that nonsense. Half of it's been opened and you've taken one out. They won't take that back, will they? They said no, they won't actually. I said, what's going to happen to it? He said, you don't want to know. I said, I do want to know. He said, really? And he could tell I wasn't going to go away. And he finally said to me, well, do you know what we did on my last job? He said, I haven't a clue what we're going to do on this job, but on the last job, the last day the JCB was here, we got into a big hole, and we stuck it all in the hole, and we covered it up, and it's now a car park, and you won't know it's there. And that is a far from uncommon story in the construction industry, I'm afraid to say. And it just, I think we ought to tell the bad stories about our business, as well as the good ones, because they're true, and otherwise it's lying, as Justin said. And we need to go to the back doors of our business as well as through the front doors. And we need to see it from the supplier's point of view as well as the customer's point of view. And I met Gary in our business. Gary was a young guy. He's now a project director, but he certainly wasn't then. And Gary had a garage and he didn't have a car. And he used to take the stuff from the end of the project and stick it in his garage and take it to the next job. The small bits of it that were it was all good, but only some of it was relevant to the job because there are so many different brands in our business, it's a nightmare. But his garage was stuffed full of it. And then I met his wife 10 years later. He didn't have a wife at the beginning. And she'd said, no, I've taken over the garage. I don't know what Gary does with it now. And there are Garys in all our businesses. They're fantastic people, but they're not supported from the top in general. Gary in our business certainly wasn't. We're living at a crucial moment in the history of our world. We have runaway climate change. It's not the only problem that we have, but it is absolutely major. We have mountains of waste in our oceans. Our forests are being cut down. Temperatures have already risen 1 degree, and they're forecast to rise at least 1 more degree, and that's by the conservative scientists. It is an overwhelming majority of them. Others will say much more. We have, in 2018, half the people of the planet had a decrease in their standard of living by 11%. The billionaires in our planet grew their wealth by £2.5 billion a day that year, and last year it was considerably more. Problems of inclusion, problems of planetary destruction. Here's Sir David Attenborough's comment on it. We're facing a man-made disaster of global scale, our planet, our greatest threat in 1,000 years, the extinction of much of the Can you turn this down, someone, please? It's unpleasant. The extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. Now, that's not the only problem we have, but it is a major one. It's a very major, thank you. And the challenge is we know what we need to do, but we don't yet appreciate the scale
and the speed at which we need to do it. And I want to just break us up a moment, and I want you to talk to the person or two next to you and ask 3 questions. Who are you? What do you think we should do? And why is it so difficult? 5 minutes, please go. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to wrap those up as quickly as they started. These conversations can carry on. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, I hope you agree, transformation of the way we do our business is essential. And business can be, and it should be, a force for good. We need, in my view, to come from CSR, corporate social responsibility, to RSC, responsible, socially purposed corporations. Clear sense of social purpose of some kind, variety of them, diverse. This is the best business agenda we can find. Nothing is more motivating for our people than a belief that they can make a difference. I don't really mean a difference to their business and to their career or their salary. Of course I don't. I mean something much more significant than that. I want to argue that this is also profitable. But it's in that order. The profitability is no longer the primary objective in this business model. And I want to give you 2 examples. Who likes chocolate? Most of us? Good. Who's willing to pay a little more for fairly traded chocolate? Now then, fewer hands up at the moment. Who wants then to support the chocolate growers, who gives a monkeys about them? Because very, very, very few chocolate growers earn a living wage. They cannot educate their kids, they barely have sanitation that is healthy. Most of them don't, a few do. Water is miles away for most of them, clean water. But that's an example of the transformation we need. A change from me first to everyone wins. And here's the story of a business of divine chocolate that you may know of. I've come across it recently. Lovely business trying to do this.
Smallholder cocoa farmers are some of the poorest people in the world. They earn less than $400 a year from their cocoa crop, and it means that they aren't earning enough to sustain themselves and their families. This is a problem for all of us, though, because smallholder farmers are probably responsible for delivering 70% of the world's food, so we're relying on them for the food that we eat.
Many farmers worldwide are making efforts to change that paradigm, as a group of cocoa farmers in Ghana did in the early 90s. With the support of a fair trade group and the goals of running a successful organization that empowered farmers, increased women's participation, and developed sustainable cocoa cultivation, they set up a cooperative called Kwapa Cocoa.
The farmers organised themselves at a village level, and they were first of all in 22 villages, and they elected their local executive, and they had instituted quotas for women, so you had to have 2 out of 5 women on the executive. And they very quickly developed a reputation for being honest and efficient, and I think the best way to illustrate that is that they bought weighing scales so farmers could finally trust the transaction.
As Kwapa Cocoa began to thrive, they decided to expand beyond the sale of cocoa and create the first fair trade chocolate bar aimed at the mass market. They recognized the real value in cocoa went beyond the crop itself. There was value in the marketing of the final product, the chocolate. That's when Sophie Tranchel came on board.
Joining a company that was owned by cocoa farmers was an amazing opportunity for me because everybody loves chocolate, so it's a perfect way to open the conversation about, have you thought about where this product comes from? Have you thought about the people that work to grow the cocoa? And then the idea that you had such a fabulous brand name as Divine and you had a wonderful range of chocolates and it was owned by cocoa farmers, it was just an irresistible combination.
Fair trade is important because it gives consumers a chance to vote with their wallet on how they want to see businesses run, such as paying farmers a living wage and making sure that their environmental practices are upheld.
So has anyone eaten Divine chocolate here? 10, I should think. I'm going to challenge you. Perhaps it could be an opportunity. Look for some on your supermarket shelves this Lent. Don't give up chocolate. Buy fairly traded. Pay a little bit more. That could be your Lenten sacrifice. Cadbury's chocolate isn't fair trade anymore. It was. I'm trying to unbrand Cadbury's. They don't deserve the reputation they have. Divine, barely heard of it, most of us, absolutely does. So, are we willing to make small sacrifices for our global community? It's not a big sacrifice to buy different chocolate. It is available. But in case you believe that this purposeful business model is only for small businesses, I want to give you another example. It's one that's been mentioned today. And here is an interview from its newly retired chief
Smallholder cocoa farmers are some of the poorest people in the world.
Here, sorry. Paul Polman.
Climate change and inequality, once more, is the most burning issues. I don't want to live in a world where still 3 billion people don't have access to clean drinking water or sanitation. I don't want to live in a world where nearly 1 billion people are going to bed hungry. And frankly, the numbers are going up. I don't want to live in a world where 3.8 billion people still live off less than $5.50 a day. And I don't want to live in a world where we are about to commit the biggest intergenerational crime as we're doing with the devastating effects of climate change. So a transformation to a more sustainable, more equitable future. One, as we call it in the Sustainable Development Goals, of not leaving anybody behind is absolutely, absolutely crucial. I believe that business, which is now the biggest force in any economy, should be a force for good. It's just absolutely no other option. After all, why would otherwise society let these businesses be around?
So that's Paul Polman receiving an award. Here's a bit more.
Inequality, once more, is the most burning issues. I don't want to live in a world where still 3 billion people don't have access to clean drinking water.
Sorry, that's a repeat. Where's the next one?
I would also argue it's probably the best business agenda that you can get, and the longer we wait, increasingly it's also more profitable. Our returns over these 10 years have been 300%, more or less. Our return on invested capital is 19%. I would argue that the development agenda is one of the most profitable agendas.
So Paul Polman moved his business in 2007 when he became chief executive. He joined from Nestle. He was a finance man. And he set out a stakeholder model for Unilever that said profit and shareholders are not our primary single objective. Planet became one of their stakeholders, as well as suppliers, as well as customers, all the usual range. They have 3 big goals at Unilever. Number 1, improving health and well-being for 1 billion people. They're not playing small. And that's by 2020, that's by this year. They've actually achieved that, if you look on their website, in 2018. And they describe precisely how they've done it. It is quantified. And from what I know, it is very trustworthy. I know some of their sustainability people. So, secondly, reducing their environmental footprint by 50% by 2030, that one. Thirdly, enhancing livelihoods for millions. They're talking then about their own people, their own employees, and their supply chains. And they're talking about diversity, they're talking about fairness, they're talking about inclusivity. These are huge goals on a colossal scale, and a little story that I came across as to how powerful it is for their people. Their R&D director at Port Sunlight near Liverpool was due to retire. He was fed up with working with for Unilever. He had been asked year after year after year to take 10% out of the cost of this packaging or that product, and he was fed up with it. And he was going early. And Paul Pullman became chief executive, and suddenly, the new year before he retired, the New Year's goals were put in front of him. And he had to develop a sachet for single-use shampoo, which is what's sold in India, where the sachet will hold the shampoo for 6 months. It then gets used, thrown away, and it had to decompose in the next 6 months. Now that was a challenge he was very interested in. Because if you go to India, you will see single-use shampoo sachets and washing up liquid sachets everywhere. And he stayed, and his team got into these goals. They now have developed products that need less water to wash with and still get the utensils clean, hair clean, bodies clean. They are deeply into the way people use their products. And it is so motivating for their staff. He's still there and he still loves his job and he's way beyond retirement date. And his team love what they do now. 4 needs. It's worth saying the share price of Unilever tripled during that 10-year period up to 2017. 19% return on capital, average over 10 years. Superb business by rethinking it. What are the 4 things we need to do? We need to do business differently, number 1. We need to do it collaboratively. We need to remove the ego from it. If you want a really big Lenten sacrifice, work on that one. How do we remove our egos from our work? We need to work on bigger objectives that inspire people. Second, we need to turn the volume up. Who's the great expert at that at the moment? Greta Thunberg, a kid at school who has the loudest voice that embarrasses the President of the USA every time she speaks. It is brilliant. How do we turn up our volume in our business in a constructive way? Third, we need to put people first on our agenda, not money. Life is about people, and that takes courage. But as Paul Pullman showed, it's courage that pays off, pays everyone off very handsomely. Fourth, we need to take individual responsibility. No snowflake in an avalanche feels responsible. But we must remember the impact of individuals like Rosa Parks, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. Individuals who thought they were little people. You think little things can't make a big difference? Go to bed with a mosquito. You'll see how big things jump when smart little things get to work. And enjoy divine chocolate. Thank you.
Time for questions.
If you want.
Like some questions?
If you wish.
Would anybody like to, in fact, I want to just go back onto the platform. Anybody like to put a question? We have got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. I have to say, what's going to stick in my mind from that is the mosquito. But it is a brilliant picture that if you bring to mind will just, make you think about how small things can make a difference. Questions? Over here. Project. And say who you are and where you're from.
My name is Hannah Kozik. I work for a company called Waste Repository Limited. We're a nuclear waste disposal company.
Speak up.
I'm curious, my question to you is, your family business is a construction business. Many years ago I worked in construction as an engineer. I'm very curious as to how you took those principles you described and influenced and changed your company business.
So the question is how you applied
your
own.
Our family business is NG Bailey. It's a business I'm a shareholder in. It's not known outside construction. It's fairly well known inside construction with the biggest mechanical and electrical company in the UK. Okay. I realised that if we weren't then the biggest, but if we'd done this for very nearly 100 years, we were actually contributors to climate change because we probably turned on more electrical circuits in the UK and bigger ones than anyone else. And when I said this to our board, they said, but that's not our responsibility, is it? And I said, of course it is. How can you possibly say it's not, unless you think the problem's trivial and it's actually not unimportant, which they certainly weren't saying. And it's a question of us. I fell out with my father big time over this and had to wait. You know, I didn't want to join our business, but I was in a mess in my own career at one little point, and it was my best option. And I had to wait till he'd retired. I mean, there's no way we could have worked together because he had struggled mightily to build a business from nothing. And for him, you had to fight for profit in what was an exceedingly barbaric world. No prisoners get taken in construction. They're shot on sight. And he had certainly been in that position, and the world was changing. It was no longer quite as bad as it had been in his day. And I felt, A, we could afford to do this, and B, actually, it was, I kind of sensed it was highly motivating for our people, but when I got down to it, we're a fairly trade-level operator in construction. We're not the graduate level. We have very few graduates in our business. We have a good few more now. But it didn't, the kind of ideas bit didn't motivate them anything like as much as I thought they would. But they did enjoy having fun together. They were fantastic on site. We did a brilliant job most of the time. And to give them challenges that they enjoyed was absolutely. So why can't this team, while we're building this project, also engage with some schools locally, find some apprentices, because we did a lot of apprentice training, and find a charity locally as well and raise. What target do you want? Set your own target as to what you're going to raise. And enjoy working together and engage the other trades. Engage BAM or one of the main contractors, whoever it is on the project. And they love doing that. And we made it, I set some challenges to do with our own carbon footprint. But we also offered opportunities for them to get home earlier. When I joined, we were a business, everybody had a car in our business. We had 1,300 cars at one point, on top of all the vans and stuff. And we said, you don't need to use your car to get places, you can use the train. And then when the technology came, you don't need to use the train, you can do it all by video conferencing. Get home earlier. Do 2 meetings a year as a commercial team or something, and not one a month. And it was this permissive stuff that to begin with I was given a really hard time for. But construction in boom time, expenses aren't looked at quite so closely, so using the train was okay. It absolutely got stuffed during the recession, 2011, 12, 13, but that was when the technology became available to do conferencing. And you make it interesting and fun for people, and I think you treat them as people. Instead of simply a performance sheet where you've made 9% on this project, you've made minus 2%. That's just not motivating. You've got to do everything. To me, it's this multiple, diverse approach. Business is about many things, people with many interests, not just one. To me, that's only the beginning, but...
Any more questions, comments, thoughts? Anything you'd like to add to the conversation? Can I ask you, this is something that strikes me because I worked with the health and safety executive a long time ago, and just because you're talking about the construction industry, and of course accidents in the construction industry were high.
Yeah.
At the Health and Safety Commission, we're looking at how to, obviously drive down accidents in all sorts of sectors. But what became apparent to us was that when the big guys said, I'm not going to subcontract to you if you have an accident, if there's a near miss in your accident book, then people started to take notice. Do we need to do something like this?
In this world?
In this world?
Well, I think measuring how a business is likely to perform in construction and awarding subcontracts is the essence of our life. And for thousands of people, I mean, 15% of the cars on the road in Britain are construction cars, people working for construction, and that's on top of the wagons delivering the materials. It's massive, and a company like Wilmot Dixon I admire immensely because they really have tried to take this seriously. At the moment, I think the mistake we've made, and I'm going to try and slim it down and focus it a bit, is that we've awarded subcontracts based on cost, on a finance model that has proved disastrous because you end up with a Carillion story. That's the big name, but there are thousands of businesses that collapsed after Carillion and collapse every month in construction because they haven't got the cash flow to sustain their business activity, and when they crash, suppliers crash in huge numbers or suffer losses. And a model that isn't purely a financial model in awarding contracts says, have you got the strength and the competence to do this job, not just are you offering the lowest price? Now, by all means bring in health and safety to that. It's an extremely hard measure, and government is the worst at it. Because for government, the answer that this was the cheapest is always a good answer, it seems. But that's part of the broken world we're in that says finance measures everything and measures it right. What a lot of rubbish. I'm an accountant. I don't believe that for a moment. But when you compare one number to another, it's always easy to see which is the bigger, which is the smaller, because numbers are like that. Are they accurately measuring? Are they? Heck. Rubbish in, rubbish out. Surely this company knows that well. So multiple measures, but of competence and quality as well as just of cost. The lifetime cost of a building is about, well, it's somewhere between 10 and 100 times the build cost. Surely we should be measuring that in our buildings, not just how much it's going to cost to construct. Lifetime energy use, it's 100 times the cost of our project, what we've done in the building. Anyway,